Our next speaker is Mr. Alexander Bingham. Alexander is a graduate student from Dripping Springs, Texas, who will receive his Master of Architecture degree this December. Alexander has been a very active figure in the life and culture of our college for a number of years, and he's taken real advantage of programs and opportunities within both the college and university. He participated in our Land Arts of the American West program, and he was a scholar in the university's Center for Undergraduate Research. With the center, Alexander conducted original research for his project entitled The Carbon Footprint Analysis of a Cotton Farm and proposed carbon neutral development. His faculty advisor was College of Architecture professor David Driscoll, who's here and is one of our conference presenters this morning. I also want to point out that Alexander has worked for both CTA Architects Engineers and Baldrige Architects, both in Austin. Alexander describes his work and the direction of his career as transdisciplinary. He seeks to bridge research, theory, and practice, which very much is what this conference is about today. And this transdisciplinariness will come across in his presentation today, which is based on a paper he originally wrote for Dr. Saif Haq's graduate course in architectural theory. Alexander's paper is titled Shift, Human Activity and the Built Environment. So, Alexander Bingham.
So, as mentioned before, this was written in June 2012 for the Theory of Architecture taught by Saif Haq. And instead of reading through the entire thing, I'll try to act as a tour guide and just pull out certain segments and snippets of it instead of reading the entire thing all the way through. So, due to human activity, the environment in which society lives and architecture takes place has shifted. Looking at the surface of the earth, what was before natural is now and forever will be constructed. This recent figure-to-ground reversal has significant effects on how contemporary architects and architectures respond both conceptually and physically to the notion of the place. So I will begin with how human activity, both physical and mental, have altered what we consider natural into that of the constructed. Then I will continue on by using the analogy of the figure ground, a common technique in architecture drawing that reveals positive and negative space, is then used to exemplify the shift. And then I will conclude with the current architecture's reaction to the shift. So first we'll start with the human activity on the physical side. Nature, as defined by the Oxford Dictionary, is that which is not made or caused by humankind. In the past, nature was conquered or tamed by elaborate explorations that took humans across vast oceans and seas to new lands and cultures. In their wake, artifacts, buildings, and cities were left. Today, we are at the end of these great terrestrial explorations, as seen with the final governmental-backed NASA manned space travel. We have, at the human scale, traversed the entire surface of the Earth and a little bit beyond. So I then go on to talk about three significant ages that had a significant impact on nature due to human activity, with starting with agriculture, then moving to the Industrial Revolution, and then finally ending up at the digital age, which we are currently in today. And so sort of the ace in the card deck, so to say, is the geologic chain known as Anthropocene. So since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, novel biotic, sedimentary, and geochemical changes to the Earth have occurred. Anthropocene, viewed as the period during which human activity has been the dominant influence on climate and the environment, extends humans' physical existence to that of the entire planet. So after going large scale, I bring it back and focus in on the transition between natural and constructed, how we get from the one to the other. So the common model is a site is chosen, materials are brought, and construction begins. The method of all built works follow these three basic steps. Looking deeper into the moment where nature transitions into the constructed, we can begin to see why the process of using nature as a baseline in construction becomes flawed. A site is always already conceptually and physically constructed prior to building architecture, by the way it is known and by its history. In the process of looking at a site, one has a preoccupied agenda for what they are looking for or at. In the case of architecture, this method of evaluation and distortion of a particular space in nature alters that space into a place, or in this case, the site. In the form of mental manifestations, so first I presented the physical side of how we alter nature, and now I'll talk about the mental side. Human activity has altered nature by the construction of place through meaning. To construct is to build or make something, typically a building, a road, or machine that is physical. Or it is to form an idea or theory that is conceptual. If nature is unmanned and exists only in the realm of space, humans who think of and give meaning to this space alter its characteristic, causing it to become constructed. If we think of nature in terms of landscape, we intrinsically frame a perspective of what landscape signifies. So if you'll indulge me, when I say the word landscape, what image conjures up in your mind? So as you're thinking about this mental picture probably has a creek running in between a hillside framed by foliage, much like Thomas Cole's view of Mount Holyoke in Northampton, Massachusetts. But this is not what everything in nature looks like. Through one's use of past experiences with nature and the environment, you interject meaning into your view of nature. In doing so, you create a specific place. In the desert, the most natural of unnatural places, one is swiftly reminded of the power of place, with the sun baking down on your neck and your Nalgene bottle weightlessly clanking next to your side. You look out onto the isotropic landscape that is devoid of awe and wonder how this is. How could anyone think this was constructed? Then you look down and see a footprint in the dried mud and a rifle cartridge nearby. You look up at the sound of a plane passing overhead. The desert with its vastness is not empty. Although human activity is sparse, it is not vacant. The footprint shows that someone has indeed been there before you. Most deserts are located in between more moderate environments and thus becomes a place of travel. The plane overhead, like you, are en route from one place to another. You are not isolated, but distant from the effects of construction. The blankest of blank canvases even the blankest of blank canvases have an embedded texture and character within their minutiae to which to paint upon. When space is given meaning, it turns into a place and separates itself from nature. The process by which this is done is nonlinear and ever-changing, yet it can still be identified. Space, as depicted by the large solid line circle in figure A, provides the context for place, the small dotted circle in figure A. And at the same time, place derives its meaning from that particular space, resulting in figure B. Place is commonly defined both as a noun, as a particular position or point in space, and as a verb to be put in a particular position. In reference to architecture, many definitions from Heidegger's Revealing of Man's Existence to Fred Lukerman's 6 Components of Place to J.A. May's Place as defined by geographers, and most notably, Christian Norberg Schultz's Total Phenomenon and Genius Loci concepts of place.
Through this creation of place, society has given meaning to everything on the entire surface of the earth, and thus altered the natural into that of the constructed. So at this moment, I'd like to briefly read a quote by Jill Stoner, who is a current professor at MIT. And this summarizes the first point of physical and mental human activity that has altered the natural into that of the constructed. Primordial nature, as that which precedes civilization and culture, is necessarily mythic. It disappeared at the very moment that it became so explicitly defined. Positioned in opposition to culture, the concept of nature is itself a cultural invention. Constructed around the vicissitudes of human history, alternatively as antagonistic or allied, as a subject of fear or pathos, cast into exile or placed in protective custody. So, going through these different models, we began with the most common one, which is at the base, where we move from natural to constructed. And we begin with the raw materials from the earth, getting the clay, then using that clay to make bricks, then assembling the bricks to construct a building. Then I talked more about the binary relationship between natural and constructed, that's in either or. But really, and after reading Jill Stoner's quote, every time you try to approach the natural or nature, it actually folds back on itself and becomes constructed. Because anytime a human actually tries to reach both physical and mental closeness to the natural, because we're human in ourselves, it always folds back onto the constructed. So now I'll use the figure ground, which is a common technique in architecture, as an example of the shift that occurs with the figure ground. Maybe that wasn't clear. So I'll use the figure ground, looking at the relationship between natural and constructed, and that binary split, the either or. Due to physical and mental human construction, the natural has become constructed. Architecture's relationship with nature until the time of the Industrial Revolution and the rise of modernism was that of a binary figure ground. The figure or constructed was thought to be built upon the ground or natural. The cumulative, comprehensive, and continual addition of construction has not just outweighed but completely blotted out the natural, creating a figure ground shift that replaced natural for that of the constructed. This is seen in Zhang Li's Complexity and Eric Fisher's The Geotagger's World Atlas. The shift changes the fundamental context of the already preoccupied site, whether it is in the city or in the desert. The effects of this shift, if not already visible, are significant to society, culture, and the future of human activity. So then in the paper, I use this as an excuse to talk about the modern built environment and kind of go more into depth of what the built environment we currently live in looks like and the current conditions and characteristics. However, I'll skim over that today and get to the responses of those characteristics of the shift, beginning with David Graham Shane's The 7 Ages of Postmodernism, which can be found in his writings, Recumbent Urbanism. Whether they are called urban actors, recombining elements in order to create conceptual models of cities at various scales, or the bricoleur addressing himself to a collection of automates left over from human endeavors, architectures of the shift see the city as multivalent, layered, and fragmented. The responses to these conditions brought about the use of assemblage, network, and collage. The city is a generative source for architecture to operate within.
The thicker, layered, and more fragmented the constructed city becomes, the better position it places itself for being a catalyst or jumping off point. The opportunity to create through fragmentation and assemblage and deconstruction and synthesizing allowed architectures of the shift to operate in multiple locations and with multiple configurations of how to alter the built. So next, I selected two current writings, the first being Tom Main's Combinatory Urbanism, and Jill Stoner, who was mentioned before, in Toward a Minor Architecture. Both of these had relevant and prudent issues that related to the shift, which I have previously identified. In Combinatory Urbanism, Tom Main states, while man-made and natural were once more clearly delineated conditions, today these social constructs are merging. Nothing is entirely natural. Everything is to some extent synthetic and multiscalar. Moreover, figure-ground distinctions are fading, blurring the line between building and site, urban and rural, and internal and external. And so this is a quick sketch that was pulled from the book, which is a site analysis sketch looking into the connectivity and difference in establishing a master plan. In Toward a Minor Architecture, Jill Stoner analyzes the current conditions of the built environment and the minor but important and influential role architects play within a politically charged place of construction. In response to the figure ground shift, opportunities for minor architectures emerge when the soul of a society is understood as more than a singularity, when, though a major soul constructs, minor souls await opportunities to deconstruct. Architects can no longer just think of buildings as an additive process. Deconstruct, or designing by breaking down, selecting, and separating, becomes vital in restoring balance. One such example of this reappropriation is seen in the lineage of the Michigan Theater in Detroit. Built on the original site of Henry Ford's first car manufactory, the Michigan Theater was closed and partly demolished in 1967. In 1982, its stage performed for not an audience of the cultural elite, but that of vehicles. The spectacular aesthetic, quote, gives this theater, and now parking garage, its notable place as an adaptive reuse example, building within the constructed. Minor architecture, or architectures of the shift, are more responsive and tactful to these given conditions. Rather than being backed by political and economic controllers and given a bulldozer, architectures of the shift are adaptive in both planning and execution of building. Acting as an anthropologist, carefully removing the excess around a dinosaur bone, architectures of the shift practice specificity in where and for how long they act within a place. Operating within the already constructed can be overwhelming and at the same time opportune. The site is preoccupied by knowledge and power and time. And it is the task of the architect to excavate and assemble the given into something new. These existing multiple layers of the constructed lends itself as the material in which to mold and define place. Within this already constructed canvas, we see a shift from the making of buildings with materials of nature to the making of spaces with the already built. Just as nature, in the form of clay, was ingeniously baked into a form of a brick, which was assembled with other bricks to create a wall that defined an edge of a building, the constructed is now the nature in which to ingeniously extract materiality from. The environment in which architecture takes place has shifted from the natural to that of the constructed due to physical and mental human activity. Looking at how architectures of the shift operate in and around this new total constructed environment, it is evident that knowledge of this past, present, and future of the site is important. The material of nature is now the material of the built. Thank you.